Hey guys, we're continuing our setup with our Ford 9-inch. In the last video, in part 2, we set up the pinion bearing preload and talked about our crush sleeve. In this video, we're going to talk about setting up backlash. Now, when we assemble this setup, the ring gear and the pinion gear, as the teeth mesh together, we have to have some play in there. As we get them closer together, they get tighter. They can be too tight. There's a specification called ring gear backlash that we set up with a dial indicator. I've got a magnetic base dial indicator I borrowed from the school set up on here. And this will help us determine that measurement. So in your repair manual, or if you're using Aldad or Mitchell, there'll be a spec on backlash. It's how much play there is in teeth. Now on the Ford 9-inch, they have adjusters on each side of the differential, and they're threaded. So we can take that ring gear and move it in towards the pinion or away from the pinion and open up that gap we have, that backlash. Those adjusters also set our preload on those bearings. So if you run both of them in, you're going to load the bearings more. If you run them both out, you're going to load less on the bearings. And if you move both of them one direction or the other, we'll move the ring gear closer to or farther away from the pinion gear. You'll notice on here, and everything's upside down because I had to spin it around for my camera angle. I've got markings on these caps. These are like main caps. If you're familiar with engines, if you remember that from junior year, we talked about how the main caps only go on one way on the engine. On the other side here, I've got marked left and right, which way's up. These have to be aligned properly. If you flip them upside down or switch them left and right, you're going to have problems. You're going to put stuff in a bind. So always mark these before you take them out. Also in these setups, torque is critical. The main caps, they have to be torqued. Over-torquing them can distort the housing, cause bearing problems. Same with our ring gear bolts. We talked about these in the component video. They are special bolts. There is torque for them. We torque them just like everything else we've torqued in engines. We do in a crisscross pattern. So everything's torqued equally. I've already got my dial indicator set up. We're going to measure backlash. So, if you can hear it in the video, you'll hear a little clicking sound. That is a little bit of play we have between the ring gear and the pinion gear. And you'll notice that needle moves. Now the numbers might be a little hard to see on here, but they're reading thousandths of an inch. Right there is 0, and there we hit about 11 thousandths. I'm a little out of spec on this one. I think the spec for 9-inch was 6 thousandths to 10 thousandths. Now we have to have that little gap in there because as this stuff heats up and things expand, it's going to get tighter. If it's too tight, we're going to burn the gears up. So there would be our measurement. Now if we had to adjust it, there's a spanner wrench. There's holes in the sides of these adjusters. You can turn them to adjust that. It's nice on a 9-inch. There's no special kits involved as far as shims. A lot of the other manufacturers use shims, where you got to take shims out behind the races, shim it left or right. You also shim it to set your preload. I don't have my spanner tool here today. It's at the school, and we are locked out of the school due to coronavirus. So we're working with what we got. There should be, normally there's locks on here. It's a little flat metal tab with an ear. It goes in those holes, locks them in place so these things don't back off in the vehicle. The heavy truck industry uses a very similar setup, but they're a lot bigger. Another measurement we can do also with a dial indicator is we can read runout. So just like we talked rotors, if you got a warped rotor, as you spin that rotor, it's going to move in and out. So we can set that dial indicator up on the back side of the ring gear, spin the ring gear, and see if there's any warp in that ring gear. Also, when we're assembling differential, cleanliness is key. I know this one's kind of crusty looking. It's an old one we use as a training aid at the school. When you're assembling these, you do not want any kind of dirt or debris in the bearings or gear set. You'll cause wear, premature failure of the differential. One of the things I can't show you right now is wear pattern. I don't have any gear marking compound. Usually use a yellow gear marking compound. You will coat the teeth. You will spin it by turning the pinion gear, and it'll develop a pattern and show you where that gear is making contact. I'll add into our Google Classroom some pictures of proper patterns for the teeth. When you do the pattern, you need to have a pry bar set in place to create a little bit of drag against the ring gear so it'll make an actual good swipe as it wears on the marking compound.